Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of FilmFellas. Ed's here. All right, Ed.
Hey guys, all right, mate. How's it going?
Oh, all right. You've got a decent Wi-Fi connection for once.
Oh well, they've let me into the house, so
So
yeah.
you and I have been chatting over the last couple of weeks about Bond. Bond's
Yep.
kind of propping up on the horizon. Oppenheimer comes out. Everybody's banging on about Nolan being given the reins of Bond and Willie, and should he?
Yep.
And that's prompted a couple of conversations with you and I and Bond.
Yeah.
So let's, a lot of people will talk about, well, who's going to be the next Bond. I'm not really that bothered about that at the minute. I'm probably more interested in who's going to be directing it.
Well, I think one leads naturally to the other, doesn't it? I mean, the directors are going to bring in their favourites and all have a big say in it.
Well, certainly Nolan will, won't he? Because
yeah,
I do think that it's probably highly likely Nolan would go for somebody like Cavill or Aaron Taylor Johnson, who he's worked with before. He does like to work with actors he's worked before, but apparently Nolan was instrumental in Cavill getting Superman. So anyway, before we start, let's talk about Bond. Let's talk about our love and hatred and dismissiveness or fandom for Bond. Where do you stand on Bond? I mean, it's always been part of our kind of childhood.
You know what? I'm a big fan of Bond. Always have been. I mean, I remember watching them with my dad and even read some of the books when I was younger. Didn't really understand them then. I think I reread Casino Royale or something. One of the early Fleming books. And I understood it better now. It's a bit weirder and darker as an adult. At the time, I thought it was going to be something like Biggles, and then it turns out there was a lot more to it. But yeah, it was. I'm a big fan. I mean, it's total escapism for the most part. Certainly, like pretty much the first, I don't know, 20. I don't know, what number are we on now? What's?
Oh, God knows. What are we on? Bond.
We must be on 23 or 4
25. I think we've just 25. Done 25. So 26.
Yeah, so the first 22 of them were just absolute. They're almost tongue in cheek, aren't they? Really. I mean, Peter Sellers obviously did on what was it?
Casino Royale, yeah, and that's kind of not counted, is it? That's kind of not canon. And and as you know, and as you can probably see, there's a Peter Sellers book there. I'm a huge Peter Sellers fan. For me, there's a golden era of Bond for me that I want them to recapture. And you can have a look at Bond's first kind of director at the helm was Terence Young. He did Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball, which I don't mind. They're good. They're kind of almost like you look at them through a nostalgic lens. But for me, really, it's only when you get to Guy Hamilton and Lewis Gilbert that I consider them the golden age of Bond. So Guy Hamilton did Goldfinger, Diamonds Are Forever, Live and Let Die, which hands down I think is my favourite Bond. He did The Man with the Golden Gun, which is probably close to being one of my favourite Bonds. And then Lewis Gilbert did You Only Live Twice. And then what a lot of people argue is probably Moore's best out in his Bond, which is A Spy Who Loved Me. And he also did, which I think is the misunderstood one, and I've got a real big soft spot for it, which is Moonraker.
It's a great movie. That's a great Sunday afternoon movie.
Yeah, and and out of all of them, I guess the Connery one, You Only Live Twice, for me is what I would consider the quintessential Bond adventure. It's got everything. The big hidden base at the end. The great gadget with the helicopter and things like that, and it's got lots of amazing locations and things like that. And I think that kind of period of Bond for me is the golden age. The age that I don't like is when John Glenn took over. He did For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, A View to Kill, The Living Daylights.
It became a bit. I don't know. I want to use the word camp, but I'm not sure I can.
Well, they were just daft. I think they were just daft. It's funny because License to Kill was on the other day, and a lot of people go on about how Dalton's a grittier Bond and things like that. And there are moments where he's very dark. You know, like where he chucks the case of money at the guy and he falls in the shark tank. But there's things which are just like, you know, when you consider it came out in 1989, and it's just hilarious. Like the bar fight is just a joke. You know, the guy attacks him with a marlin, and Bond's swinging across dance floors, and then he does that punch like that, which is like you know, when you consider that came out in 1989, the same year that Lethal Weapon 2 came out, and we'd had Die Hard, and we'd had the first Lethal Weapon. It's pretty poor direct. I mean, the direction of it is pedestrian.
Was it not an attempt to sort of, you know, I always felt that those films were an attempt to kind of meet the Indiana Jones audience. So they had that kind of Hollywood approach instead of the kind of very British upper lip kind of attitude towards a lot of that, which the early Bonds were really great at. I mean, I was a big fan of Timothy Dalton. I thought he could have been a great Bond, and they just sort of slightly misused him. And you know, he ironically one of the few British Bonds.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, he does have that cold-hearted killer look about him, and but his films are a massive letdown. But you know, I mean, Octopussy is just the worst. It's just awful. You know, and A View to a Kill is laughable as well. You know, Roger Moore and his hairpiece. You know?
Well, I mean, I'm not. I mean, where do you stand on the Roger Moore, Sean Connery question?
I mean, they're two very different interpretations of Bond. I really like 3 of Roger Moore's outings. The Spy Who Loved Me, Live and Let Die is hands down my favourite Bond. I absolutely love Live and Let Die, and Roger Moore makes it. And then Moonraker, I really like Moonraker, but I also think Moonraker has got one of the best Bond scores. By John Barrett. The score is tremendous. I mean, but I prescribe to the idea that Connery is the quintessential Bond.
Yeah, I think Connery had a. I mean, that's an interesting point in itself that you know you've made there, is that you know this very singular character, and they managed to. Each actor has brought a completely different personality and persona to it, and I'll be interested to see now after Daniel Craig, which was arguably the most successful of the 25 Bonds, whether they carry on with that kind of dark thing or whether they go back towards the Roger Moore kind of.
But I think that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping we go back towards the more You Only Live Twice, Live and Let Die, The Spy Who Loved Me, The Man with the Golden Gun. The Man with the Golden Gun, I always felt was another really great Bond movie. You know, a formidable villain, you know, a top assassin, and it really kind of puts Bond on his way. And I'd really like to see some of those Bond adventures. You know, Man with a Golden Gun and You Only Live Twice specifically, maybe The Spy Who Loved Me as well, done through a modern interpretation. I'd be open to them revisiting some of these stories. I mean, it's interesting then, arguably, probably the director of, I know it's Rob's favourite Bond movie, which was is Martin Campbell. He did GoldenEye, and he also did Casino Royale, which are very, very different stylistically.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not a fan of GoldenEye. I was never a Pierce Brosnan fan. He was just too smarmy for me.
Yeah.
He didn't have any of the edge of the rest of them. He didn't have that kind of dark side where you thought, oh, this guy's going to flip. He was just all.
Do you know what? Interestingly, is I think Brosnan is the worst actor to play Bond, and that's saying something with you know, with Australian guy in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I just don't rate him as I just don't rate Dalton as I actually think Dalton's got better with age. But I think when he was doing GoldenEye, things like he has that thing, you know, where somebody chokes him and he has that it's that expression. You know, when it's like, but he also, I think, suffered, like almost Daniel Craig a little bit. His Bond adventures were very patchy. I mean, he had Roger Spottiswoode, Michael Apted and Lee Tamahori. Lee Tamahori was a promising director. He did Once Were Warriors, which was Once Were Warriors is a superb movie.
Fantastic,
you know, and he died. He did Die Another Day, which was Bond 20, which was Brosnan's last film, which is laughably bad in places. Awful. You know, but I don't think that's a reflection on Lee Tamahori at all. I think it's the script.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is the Bond films that you're suggesting are your favourites. A lot of those, the story from memory is largely sort of semi-sensible and engaging on its own. And then, whereas a lot of the Brosnan films and Quantum of Solace, I would put into this as well. It all became about chasing the locations and making it look like a Bond film, and I think that's where it all started to fall apart for me.
I think they lost sight of the stories in the Brosnan era. I think it got too gadget heavy, got too gimmicky. God knows why they brought John Cleese on board. You know, which was
they needed somebody. Mistake. And he had to pay for his wives, so. You know.
But then, I mean, I think Mark Foster for Quantum of Solace gets a little bit of a bum deal. I really like World War Z, but I also really like the opera scene in Quantum of Solace.
Yeah, I mean, Quantum of Solace suffered from the writers' strike. It was a half-written movie basically, and you know what makes movies really good is getting lots of people to write it. So, and I was just looking there. You know, Lewis Gilbert, who you referenced, your three favourites are all directed by him. So, and he was obviously responsible for Alfie, which is film, and I think that's. You know, that in itself sort of says it all, really. The most engaging of all these films is when it comes down to the story and dragging out that personality. And when you look at the Brosnan films, there's no real story and there's very little personality to draw through it. The first and the last two Craig movies had story, had I mean, I'm a big Skyfall fan. A lot of people don't like Skyfall, but
I mean that brings us on to Sam Mendes, doesn't it? Because Sam Mendes had, out of all the Bond directors that have ever taken the helm, he had the best pedigree. I mean, Oscar winner. He'd done American Beauty. He'd done Road to Perdition. He really was a superb director. I think he'd done Revolution Road, is it as well? And Skyfall, I agree with you. I thought Skyfall was great. I thought it was a really, really good movie. I didn't really like the idea of us getting James Bond's backstory. I didn't really like the whole thing about his relationship that he was basically related to Boyd, basically lived with Blofeld when he was younger. I thought that was a bit of a mess. But as a movie, I think Skyfall's great.
It is, and it's beautiful as well. I mean, it's beautiful without having to take you to the Algarve or anything like that. I think it's just and I think they did a good job of gently trying to explain some of Bond's background, without it getting too crazy. But then I really like the addition of M. I mean, they used what's her name?
I thought it was a great I thought the way that they kind of wrote Judi Dench out and transitioned to Ralph Fiennes was lovely. But then obviously it led to Spectre, which I just think is an absolute mess of a movie.
Well, it is just that, it's a mess. I mean, there are individual bits of it that are brilliant, but like for me, one of the worst sort of henchman baddies I've ever come across. I mean, they were all going on about him being the new Jaws, and I'm like, really? I mean, he wasn't that threatening. Didn't do that much other than push people's eyes out.
And actually, Spectre had a great opening sequence in Mexico, which I thought was really, really well done. It shows how great, Mendes is as a director and a visionary, and actually was a precursor to the One Take 1917, wasn't it? And but the car chase is just utterly boring. It's like a car advert. just cars driving around the city at night.
And they did the classic, getting stuck behind the old people in the car thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on, guys! It's like we've seen that before. There's got to be a better thing. And I enjoyed bits of that. I'm a big Christopher Waltz fan, but yeah, it's it wasn't that far. It was a shame because it was a waste of a good cast.
And then you get Carrie fucking Arger's No Time to Die, and he really kind of got the crappy end of the stick with COVID and things like that, and the delays in that. But I actually think, out of all the Craig Bonds, apart from Casino Royale, his outing has the best action scenes. It's got some superb action, like the car chase in Italy, for example, is brilliant.
Yeah,
and the what is it? The fighting in Cuba as well is terrific. He's got some great action scenes. Well, I don't particularly like it as a film.
See, I watched it a couple of times. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was, again, like the baddie wasn't good enough for me. Wasn't threatening enough.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the most average world threat I've ever come across. It was sort of, it's like, well, but it brought humanity to Bond, and I think it was a great exit for Craig. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that, and they had the brand new Land Rover Defender running through it, even though it got absolutely smashed to bits by a Land Cruiser, which made me laugh a lot.
Well, also that scene in the forest in No Time to Die, I think is superb. That's why I kind of think Carrie fucking Arger is actually, when we're talking about directors moving forward, I think he should be the first one we talk about. I mean, I've got to be honest with you. If they said that he was coming back to direct the next one, I'd be saying, go for it.
I'd be surprised if they didn't, if he wasn't high on the list. I think the only thing for me is it's a new Bond now. Yeah. So it needs a new take. It either needs to go. I mean, someone was saying to me, it's going to be. Someone said, I can't remember what it was. Someone said to me it's going to be like Bond in the Victorian times, and I'm like, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. And equally, like as much as I love Idris Elba as an actor, I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to stay. I think ultimately, if you're going to create, a racially diverse or a different gender Bond, go create a new character. Don't. It's not Bond. Bond is as written. Stay true to the source material. Go and create yourself a new action hero.
It's an adaptation, ultimately. Yeah. So, there's no reason to not be faithful to that. And Idris has got plenty of characters that he's played that are, just as interesting and exciting as Bond. I think he would probably agree. Not knowing him in any way, shape, or form, but I'm sure he would. And I think, well,
Bond it certainly looks like that's the way that they're heading with Luther. Luther looks like he's heading into some form of, I don't know whether you've seen the Luther movie, but the Luther movie at the end hints that Luther's going a bit international and he's going to go working for some secret organization of some kind.
Well, this is a big segue now, but you've seen Extraction 2, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of Extraction 2, he's not even at the end. He is in Extraction 2 as a very similar character to Luther. And then I've just seen the trailer for Extraction 3, which I hadn't realized they'd shot back to back. And he plays a big part in that, looking very much like Luther. So,
right. Are you sure that's not a fan-made trailer? I'll have to quickly Google that. Is it not? No. Right. I didn't realise that they'd shot them back to back.
Yeah. Right, but apparently, yeah. Yeah. Let me just bring up the cast. Yeah, it's upcoming, directed by Sam Hargrave.
Right.
It's produced by the Russo brothers.
Oh, no, hang on. So you might want to look at this. Have a look at the detail. It says fan concept trailer.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because it's got shots of it's got shots of No Time to Die in it.
In that case, Julian, edit this out.
No, it's got to stay in. We got to just for the hilarity of it. So let's move on to the directors that we think. So obviously, I sent you a bit of a long list of people that we talk about. I mean, we've got to talk about Nolan off the bat. Well, yeah, I mean, what do you think about Chris Nolan? I've got to say, first of all, I've seen Oppenheimer. You haven't. I think Oppenheimer is hugely overrated. It's a docudrama. It's a great historical drama.
Yeah.
It's 3 hours of people talking in rooms. The last few minutes of it, I think, are genius. It's beautiful poetry. But largely, I've got to be honest with you, it's not. It's very rare I will sit through a movie and get to the last third of it and think, God, I can't wait for this to be over. I didn't particularly enjoy it. It'll be a long time before I watch it again.
You're not the first person to tell me that, or not the last person to tell me that, I should say. But it's it's not one I was like, oh, I've got to go to the cinema and watch this. I mean, I feel like I should because of the 70mm IMAX thing, but I've seen lots of stuff in IMAX and been underwhelmed by it. I think the last thing I saw in IMAX that actually paid off was Watchmen. But yeah, I don't know. My worry with Nolan is he's either going to be great at it, if he gets it, he'd be great at it because he has this kind of raw, kind of slightly analog approach to filmmaking, and I think that might play quite well in the Bond universe. But equally, is he going to go big enough? Is he going to hold with that kind of?
Well, I think
the largesse of it. I don't know.
The best thing to look at, I mean, which is a lot of people say, is Nolan's calling card to the Bond producers is Inception, isn't it? Essentially the end of Inception is On Her Majesty's Secret Service redone. And if you look at Tenet as well, there's definite, he's basically doing a spy movie, and there's certain scenes within Tenet, like how they get into the skyscraper in India, and the car chases and things like that, and the opening scene in the opera, which are just great set pieces, thrillers done in a very, like you said, an analog and practical way, and that feel very Bond-verse, if you like. It feels like, he's saying, I'd be perfect for Bond. I've got to be honest with you, if somebody said to me, Jonathan Nolan and Chris Nolan were writing the Bond trilogy, I'd be there. It's in safe hands for me.
Well, see, that's interesting. I think if they were to approach it as a trilogy, then I mean, look, he is safe hands. I found Tenet incredibly confusing as a film. I thought it's actually one of my least favorite Nolan films. But he has a way about the directing and everything else, and I don't particularly like him as a person. But I think he has a particular look and feel, and I think that his approach would probably suit Bond quite well.
I think you'd end up with a very you'd end up with a thinking man's Bond for sure.
Yeah. I don't think you'd get back to the heyday of Moonraker with Nolan.
I think you only live twice.
I think you'd have a much more kind of gritty, realistic, trying to shoot Putin or something like that. I think it's going to be more down to the real world approach, and I kind of feel like Bond always, for me, hit for the most part a pretty good mid ground between reality and fantasy that was very believable. And I feel like Nolan might just make it too real.
I guess the other one then to talk about, after Nolan, which is I didn't think about until you mentioned it to me, and then I watched The Covenant at the weekend, and I've actually seen all his recent movies. Wrath of Man, I thought was excellent, which is Guy Ritchie, which a lot of people would balk at. I think if you said Guy Ritchie was going to do the next Bond movie, I think people would be almost Daniel Craig-like up in arms at, because everybody associates him with Lock, Stock and Snatch and those kind of gangster comedies. The Gentleman, for example, I really like The Gentleman, actually.
I really enjoyed that.
But actually, the ones to look at are how he's matured as a director recently. Wrath of Man, I think you can take out Operation Fortune. I think it's not great.
I really wish they would erase that from the world, because I couldn't watch that. I couldn't even watch half an hour of it. It was painful.
It was so bad. It was so bad. Was
such an error, and and I was really surprised because I watched Covenant first, and then watched that, thinking, "Oh, all right, okay, well, this is a bit of popcorn," and it was terrible. The best thing was Josh Hartnett was back in the world, and he was the best thing in it. And Aubrey Plaza was such a disappointment. I really like her as an actress, but
if you look at The Gentleman, you look at Wrath of Man, and you look at The Covenant, there's a certain maturity there where I kind of wonder whether Guy Ritchie is secretly going after Bond, because I think the other person that maybe Guy Ritchie doesn't want to get Bond is Matthew Vaughn. Because Matthew Vaughn is probably potentially he's the Kingsman, Kick-Ass and things like that. He's very much probably a very safe choice as a Bond director, but actually would bring a sense that I think he would capture the "you only live twice" dynamic of a Bond.
I mean, Kingsman is basically Bond, isn't it? To one of a better word. I don't know. Matthew Vaughn's. Look, he's great. He's got a real style to him, but it's also a style now that's maybe getting a little bit tired. Whereas Guy Ritchie, when you look at Lock, Stock and Snatch and all those sorts of films, there was a real style there. And then you look at The Gentleman, which is kind of like a matured version of that style. And then watching The Covenant, I mean, honestly, I watched it thinking, did it say it was produced by Guy Ritchie or directed? Because it was nothing.
It doesn't come across as a Guy Ritchie movie at all.
Nothing at all. It was thoughtful. It was well made. It was well written. The action sequences were great. Good cast. And I was sitting there going, "This is." I mean, not that he's not good at all those things generally, but I was like, "This is a film, not just a quotable film. This is a thing." But I think what Guy Ritchie does have is a really good understanding of the sort of hierarchical system of the British culture, which Bond exists in, and I think that could play really interestingly. And I think he also has access to some really interesting actors that could, like what he did with Matthew McConaughey in The Gentleman, I thought was great. I mean, a very softly played character ultimately, and probably not a big reach for McConaughey, but it was well done.
But he's very charismatic, in it, isn't he?
Yeah.
And actually,
and not used that much.
And actually, potentially, to put the cat amongst the pigeons. I know we're not going to talk about actors, potentially, but Guy Ritchie has worked with two people who a lot of people have said that are in the front running of the Bond. One of them, obviously, is Henry Cavill, but then the other one is the other Henry, which is oh god, I can't remember his name now. Henry, I'm going to Google him quickly. Henry Golding. Who is very charismatic, good looking. It made his kind of name in Crazy Rich Asians, as a kind of mixed Malaysian British kind of upbringing. But actually, Henry Golding has been touted as a potential Bond. But I mean, Ritchie, if Ritchie was a front runner, I wouldn't begrudge him the opportunity. To do it.
I mean, it would be nice to get a fresh take on Bond. I'm not sure how fresh you can go without losing the essence of it. I think that's going to be the challenge for anybody coming into this. I think you've got to show what I can't think of anybody's names now. What Fukunaga did, and what God help me.
Well, I think the other person that I wanted to kind of talk about as well, because I always, so I don't know if did you ever watch Gangs of London?
No, you've sent me various clips of it.
Yeah. So because I always thought that there's one episode, I think it's episode 5 of Gangs of London, which is basically a recreate, like it's almost like divorced from the entire story. And it's interesting, like if you go and try and find it on Sky have taken it off. If you go and watch series 1 of Gangs of London, you've got episodes 1 to 4, and then it goes to 6 to 9. It doesn't have episode 5 in there anymore. Mainly because of how incredibly violent it is. So basically, episode 5 of Gangs of London is like the ending. It's like the cottage ending of Skyfall, but just done really, really violently. And it's directed by Gareth Edwards. Gareth Edwards did obviously the Raid 1 and 2. And I actually wonder, whether he would be, up there for directing Bond.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I mean,
sorry, Gareth Evans. Sorry, Gareth Evans, not Gareth Edwards. Gareth Evans. Yeah. So he did the Raid 1 and 2, and he's currently doing a movie with Tom Hardy, which is like being positioned as like a crazy action sort of movie.
What about really left field? What about someone like Sofia Coppola or something like that?
It's funny because I guess we should talk about the female directors. Out of the female directors that I would kind of put in there, it's Catherine Bigelow has to be kind of named, but I just wonder how old she is these days. I don't know. I mean, she's directed some great action movies, Point Break and things like that. I sent you one, didn't I? It's the woman who's directed The Old Guard, Gina Prince Blythewood.
Yeah.
The
Old Guard was not great.
And there's an Old Guard 2 coming out as well.
Great.
But she also did the Warrior Woman.
She did Biker Boys as well.
But I don't think I've seen Biker Boys.
Oh, Lawrence Fishburne. It was like they tried to do Fast and the Furious with motorbikes, and quickly decided it wasn't going to work.
The Woman King. The Woman King. That was it. Yeah.
Which I haven't seen yet, but it's on my watch list. So
I've seen it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I thought it was really good. But there is, I mean, why did you not like The Old Guard? I thought The Old Guard was pretty good.
I just think it's been done and better. You know what I mean? It's it was kind of, there was a sort of Blade element to it and all that sort of stuff. And I like Charlize Theron. I think she's done some fantastic films, but I just, in that film, again, just like a wasted character. I was just like, it was a bit like watching the Tom Cruise remake of The Mummy. It was just a bit average. I was a bit like, what a shame, but just a bit average. I think it'd be interesting to see a woman direct Bond. To be honest, I think that would bring a new approach to it that hasn't been there before. I think he is, as a character, famously very misogynistic and all of those things. And Daniel Craig definitely kind of did a lot to the good for that sort of thing. But
I guess a big name in female director who could potentially then take it on would be Patty Jenkins.
She'd be good.
I didn't particularly like Wonder Woman 1984, but the first Wonder Woman I thought was good.
First one was good. I thought 1984 was, again, DC. I mean, it's a whole separate conversation, but DC just cannot keep it on a believable plane, and that's that. Even if it's an invisible plane, they can't keep it on the plane, and it's just like, allow the audience to hook onto something, because it's too fantastical otherwise.
There's one film that I saw last year, I think it was, that I really liked, which was Mary Elizabeth Winstead in Kate.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
And Cedric Nicholas Troyan directed that. He's basically done Huntsman, Winter's War, Snow White and the Huntsman, were his two kind of movies, which I haven't seen actually. I mean, you've got daughters, so I don't know whether you've seen any.
Well, I've seen the first one. I've not seen the second one, but it's, look, Chris Hemsworth twirling an axe, retelling of a classic story. It's great. It's very sort of family-ish, friendly, kind of fantastical stuff. And it's well directed. The scenes are good. And the second one, I think it's got Emily Blunt playing another Wicked Witch or something. Right. So it's
What do you think to Edgar Wright?
I just look. I'm a big fan of Edgar Wright. I think I really enjoyed Baby Driver. And I think there is something, his style of filmmaking that I've seen doesn't feel like it leaves enough breath for something like Bond. I think Bond exists best in the spaces between the action, and the best Bonds are the ones that handle that space quite well. And I think Edgar Wright's great, and he's got a lot of skill, a lot of talent, and he's got a great vision for these things. I just don't know if it's the right style for Bond.
But I would have agreed with you, right? But I think there's a lot of relation between comedy and action, and I think Hot Fuzz is a great calling card. I get what you're saying. It's about, he has that kind of, it's very still over from space, isn't it? The jump cuts and the kind of the little stories and things like that. And I did think the same until I saw Last Night in Soho, which I think
I've not seen that yet.
Really, really brilliant, really good. And maturity, ultimately it's like an Agatha Christie mystery sort of thing, with a little bit of kind of time travel thrown in, and it's got a wonderful, it really captures that 1960s essence of London and breathes a lot more. And I actually think Last Night in Soho gives, the cinematography in it is beautiful, and the way it transitions between the two kind of time zones and things like that as well is great. I do think it could be a little bit of a calling card to again, like Ritchie, to kind of showcase to the Bond producers that he's turned into a mature filmmaker. I guess the other
thing for me is that he shat the bed on the Ice Cream trilogy, didn't he, with the World's End?
Yeah, I didn't.
And I just wonder. I just wonder if it just wasn't a well. Whereas the first two were so well thought out and executed, the third one was like, we just need to do one about aliens, and it was just a bit. It would have been a great 45-minute episode of Doctor Who, but I was like,
do you know what? That's probably the best description I've ever heard of the World's End. Yeah, it is. It would have been a great Doctor Who episode. It wasn't the Cornetto trilogy ending. Another person I want to throw your way, and I wouldn't have, because Rob, as you know, just whacks off over flipping John Wick all the time, and I would never have I liked the first John Wick. I really didn't like the second or third. I just really didn't have any time for it. But then I saw the fourth one, and the fourth John Wick is amazing. And there's a whole action scene that you've got to see in it where it's top down. It's like a top down action scene. It's almost like that scene in Minority Report, where with the spiders and but it's done further out. Anyway, I think it's Chad Stahelski. And I've got to be honest with you, John Wick 4 it's done on such a broad canvas. That I do wonder whether Chad Stahelski has basically, with John Wick 4, shown that he could be a real viable option to take on Bond.
Do you know what? I mean, I'm a big fan of the John Wick movies. I like to say movie because they're basically one film. There's no difference in the first three, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, look, I think it's there. But again, for me, the action sequences aren't necessarily what makes Bond great. It's the nods to British culture. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe the British culture has moved on, like the royal family is losing interest. Everyone's losing interest since the Queen died. There was an element of trying to sort of keep that very old-fashioned.
Okay, then how about this name as a director, Paul Greengrass?
See, that's interesting to me. I mean, he's a great director.
He ultimately picked up Bourne from Doug Liman and took it to another level. And essentially, a lot of people say that, ultimately Greengrass was responsible for how the style of Casino Royale. I mean, the fight scenes in Casino Royale were just taken straight out of Greengrass's Bomber. And it feels like very much Greengrass has been forgotten as a director almost. I mean, I don't know what he's been doing recently, as a director. I mean, he's 67 years old, but he's so he's not that old, but I don't know what he's been doing recently.
He did like Green Zone, all sorts of stuff. So
I mean, at the time he was his last one that he did was News of the World, the Tom Hanks movie, which I actually really enjoyed. I
haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. It's another great kind of Tom Hanks playing out of character sort of thing.
I mean, I got to be honest. Wouldn't it be great to see someone like Clint Eastwood direct Bond?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? His final act as a director, because he's talking about retiring, isn't he? The final act as a director is to direct Bond.
Yeah, I think with the pedestrian pace that Bond's moving at the minute in kind of moving forward, I think Clint Eastwood will be 6 feet under by the time it.
I mean, I am surprised, if I'm honest, that they're carrying Bond on. I feel like Bond could, let's not rule out the idea that it just becomes a great series of limited series. Do you know what I mean? It would work really well if someone said, right, let's break this up and do a limited series for each one of the books and really tell the story, which they kind of did with the story of Ian Fleming.
Right.
I can't remember the name of it now. Oh, yeah, TV show about Ian Fleming.
Right. So the other person that I then wanted to mention, right? So there's two big name Hollywood directors, right, who might not have something on their cards soon. One is Villeneuve.
It's called Fleming, sorry. Yeah.
So Villeneuve, finishes second part of June soon. Would you want to see Villeneuve touch Bond?
I watched the first Dune recently. I was bored. That just might be me. Honestly, I think it's a big epic, isn't it?
I do wonder whether Villeneuve has positioned himself as that he just does epics, and I really liked the Blade Runner.
Yeah. What, 2049?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great.
But I felt it was good. It was the best way they could have handled Blade Runner. But yeah, I don't know. Villeneuve, I think it's just he's too big, too epic.
What about Chris McQuarrie?
No, that would be interesting. Again, another director that's got.
I mean, he is intrinsically linked with the Mission Impossible movies, so But actually, when you look at McQuarrie's, the one film that I always rate that McQuarrie he actually bombed at the time is The Way of the Gun. I really rate it. I think it's a flipping great thriller. And it'd be interesting to see that McQuarrie take on a proper spy novel. In fact, the last Mission Impossible is so full of holes plot-wise. It's almost like that they basically just rushed through the script to kind of get to just go and shoot, the stunts that they wanted to do. But it'd be interesting for But one of the things that I do think McQuarrie doesn't know how to do. I think he does. Fallout for me, I thought was the strongest, and I do think he knows how to put a thriller together.
Yeah, well, he does. Although what I'm saying here is since 2008, he has pretty much only made films with Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Which would be a bit of an issue for me as Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, look, he knows how to do this sort of film. So he would be what you referred to as safe hands for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see someone completely different, and young and that we've never heard of particularly, or I'm trying to think who I'm talking about. I tell you what, I really want to see. It's not really relevant to this. Well, it might be from a directorial point. I mean, who directed the All Quiet on the Western Front?
Oh, that was a German director, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's a thing, but no, the one I'm thinking of is it Zuzu or whatever it's called?
Yes, yeah. So All Quiet on the Western Front was directed by Edward Berger.
Yeah,
he's pretty young.
yeah.
He actually did a really good film. He did Deutschland '83.
That's right.
Yeah, which is really good.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't, he looks like he's just doing the rounds in Hollywood directing episodes of. Oh, I tell you what he did. I didn't realise he did this. I really enjoyed this. I read the books as well, and he directed Patrick Melrose.
Oh right. Oh,
yeah, which is brilliant. Really, really good.
Yeah. So I think he'd be, on my list of interesting people.
Yeah.
To go.
All right. So if we had to pin down 3 directors that Ed would like to see direct Bonds, who do you think you would like to see?
I'd really like to see Ritchie do it. I think he'd be a good shout. I think Fukunaga would has probably earned the stripes and deserves a shot at it. But I think with a new Bond, they're going to go a different route. I'd like to see a female director take on Bond.
Yeah, do you know what? I actually think
open up a new side to that.
I think a female director would be really good. And just to throw it in there, a director who I really, really rate, Lynne Ramsay.
Oh yeah, okay.
Lynne Ramsay was she did, I think, we better talk about Kevin, but more importantly, she did what I think in the year that Joaquin Phoenix got nominated for the Joker. Same year, he did a movie with Lynne Ramsay called "You Were Never Really Here," and I think it's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So, right. So, okay, right. Well, I'm gonna say Chris Nolan is my number 1. I'm actually gonna put, I'm gonna go Edward Berger as a second one, and then I'm gonna say Lynne Ramsay.
Right, I'd like to see if he actually appears. That was my idea. If he comes up,
yeah, all right, I'll give you that one. Influenced by Ed, my top 3 is Chris Nolan, Edward Berger, and I'm going to go Lynne Ramsay. I'd like to see Lynne Ramsay given a shot. Yeah. Who are you going to pick? What's your top 3?
I think I said them before. I would go with. I'd go with Ritchie, Fukunaga, and
Berger.
Yeah. Berger, let's go with Berger. I think he'd be. I just think really fresh eyes on it all, and all along the Western Front is beautiful. So, if he brings any of that into it, I think it'd be great.
Excellent. Okay, everybody. Well, hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've got any thoughts or disagree with any of the names that we suggested and want to stick us with spears and hurl insults at us, then feel free to do so below. But also make some suggestions below as to who you think should direct the next Bond. And thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of FilmFellas. Catch you later, Ed.
Cheers, dude. See you later. Take care.